Tell me a little bit about your parents. What did your father do?
My father worked for the Crucible Steel Company in Midland. He was head of the machine shop, which is where they machine tools and work of that type. And that's what he did.
Your mother was a homemaker.
Yes,
Do you know much about your grandparents?
yes, I knew them very well. My grandfather uh, came from Italy to Midland, and at the time he was married to my grandmother, and my dad was 1 year old. They came to Ellis Island, and my grandfather had heard that there was a new mill town being built in Midland, Pennsylvania, and he had sent for in Italy. They went to a notary, and he sent money to get the deed to this property that he wanted to build across the street from the orchard that was also being designed by the steel company. And he opened his grocery store, and that's where he lived and worked. And his wife, in addition to being a homemaker, helped him from time to time in the store.
Remember much about your childhood?
Well, I went to the Midland schools, and I worked very hard. My father used to say that you have to work hard to get ahead. This country has lots of opportunity.
And you attended Harvard for your undergraduate.
Well, when I graduated from high school, I was valedictorian of my class, and I remember I had high grades in history and English, and the highest grades in math and science and physics. And I got a scholarship to Harvard College. And so when I graduated from Harvard, I received a scholarship to the University of Pennsylvania Law School.
Is it correct you were appointed Assistant U.S. Attorney in Pittsburgh
Yes, I was appointed before that, that's right.
in 1959?
Right, by the Attorney General of the United States.
What was that experience like?
I enjoyed that. I was a prosecutor. I worked for Hubert Teitelbaum, who was the first assistant deputy attorney general in Pittsburgh.
How did your appointment to the Court of Common Pleas under Governor Scranton come about?
I had worked for Governor Scranton in politics. I got involved in politics when I got back to Beaver. And I, worked hard for Governor Scranton.
How did you come to be a candidate for lieutenant governor on the Republican ticket in 1970?
Well, Elsie and Henry Hillman asked me to do that. I had no intentions of running for lieutenant governor, and Hugh Scott was running, and Ray Broderick was running.
Broderick was the gubernatorial candidate, and Hugh Scott, of course, was a sitting senator who was running for re-election.
Right. And they wanted a Western Pennsylvania candidate. And I had won election in Beaver County on both tickets, Democrat and Republican, although I was a Republican. And so they asked me to run. And in fact, the guy who asked me to run for lieutenant governor was former Governor Scranton.
So you practiced law again for a brief time in Beaver County before you were appointed to the U.S. District Court.
Right.
And how did that appointment come about through President Nixon?
I think because of Scranton, really, and Scott. They used their power of suggestion to be appointed to the U.S. District Court.
And that was in November of 1971?
Mm-hmm.
Was that a surprise to you? Was that something you had aspired to do?
Well, I always felt that I would, like to be a judge, whether it was Beaver County or on the federal district court, whatever.
Do you think your background, coming from a working background of your father and grandfather, affected your judicial philosophy?
I think so. I think I usually tried to find out the underdog and if there was some merit to their case, but it didn't. I think sometimes they're just as bad as the other party. So I just tried to sort it out. But I never assumed that the less important person or company was at fault. But if they were, I would rule against them.
Did you have anything like a judicial philosophy, would you say?
Well, from the beginning when I went on the bench here, my philosophy was to try to be fair and sort out the arguments and the positions. And really, it sounds like a cliche, but it was to try to do justice.
When you were on the bench, maybe this is looking back on this, did you have any feelings about being an activist judge versus a strict constructionist, or any of that sort of way of looking at things?
Oh, I know but see, I would think that's maybe the Supreme Court's job. My job was not to be an activist. I mean, if I didn't want to lean one way or another, or drive this decision in one direction or another, I think the Supreme Court has that obligation.
Now, you resigned from the federal bench in 1976 to return to law practice?
Yes, I decided that I had a daughter who was very, very bright in her work, and I thought she's going to want to go to a first-rank college, and at that point scholarships weren't available, and I had never made a lot of money, and so I decided to go back into practice of law. And as it turned out, she got a scholarship from Bryn Mawr to the Harvard Law School. And but I liked the practice of law too.
Were there any significant or interesting cases while you were at Thorpe Reed that you were involved with?
Yes, there were a fair number of important cases, but a lot of them were business cases. Thorpe Reed's work was business law. They represented the steel company and the Gulf Oil Company, things like that.
When you were practicing law and when you were on the bench, was the law more of an intellectual exercise for you, or was it the human element that was important to you?
Well, it was always an intellectual exercise, but in the final analysis, the human element was important. If you found someone guilty, you could, in sentencing, apply the human element and make provisions for it and decide for it. I had some good teachers, and the two best were the Judge Sawn in Beaver County and Judge Reed. And they said, you can apply the law, but if there are human elements involved, you can make adequate provision.
Looking back over your career, what do you take the most satisfaction from?
Well, I don't, I'm not sure I did the right thing all the time, but I think you have to do the best you can. And whatever, if you studied it and you observed it and you thought about it and reached the right conclusion, that's the best you can do.